want to go back to this idea of perceptual relativism. That is to say, how different people see the world differently. Why is that? The standard anthropology answer is because they've been raised in different cultures. Different cultures, different people learn to perceive the world differently because of their culture. Now, the idea of perceptual relativism is closely related to both cultural relativism in general and what is known as linguistic relativism. This linguistic relativism comes to us from the idea that there is no necessary relationship between what Saussure described as the signifier and the signified. I just put a bunch of words up here, and then, maybe this will help us. Okay, so in the famous, maybe the most famous linguist representation, Saussure's representation, what happens is that there is no necessary relationship between the thing that is being described, what he called the signified, and the signifier. The fact that we call that a table, whereas we might also call it in Spanish a mesa, has nothing to do with its qualities. It's just whatever we've agreed upon conceptually that would be encoded in sound to stand for whatever it is out there. And it's the same thing with how many people approach when we look at a landscape. They say, well, what you see in the landscape is because of the cultural forms that you've been taught to see. So if I say, well, that looks like a mountain has a face in it, or it looks like an elephant, it's because of my culture, which has put this idea into my head. A diagram of this about Saussure's representation, you have the signifier. The signified is your actual cat, and the signifier is the word. And there's what you experience in the world, but then there's what you do in your head to organize the world. And it's like two sides of a sheet of paper. Ingold talks here in this chapter as he goes along. He has a description of his father, which I pulled out of Wikipedia. Ingold's father was one of the most influential mycologists of the 20th century. He was up in those science buildings, probably taught ecology classes, and he was especially interested in fungi. He was so good at discovering fungi, he has had several fungi named after him, the Ingoldian fungi. That's your dad. Your dad would be the person who got fungi named for him. Now, some of these names are changing because we don't like to name things after people as much anymore because it sounds weird. It's like, well, they were here before you. Why do you get your name on it? But that's pretty cool. Ingold says that he and his dad would go along on these walks, and his dad was trying to teach him about the fungi. But the way he did it was by having little boy Ingold touch the fungi and even taste the fungi and do all these things and experience the fungi. But here's this super big professor type who's been sending emails that tells me I can't do ecology. And they're teaching their kid in this way. He compares that to the Walbiri of Central Australia. They go across the landscape and they are introduced to various features of the landscape. On the face of it, one might say that the difference between the Walbiri and the people of Cambridge, England, or wherever it was, these highfalutin mycologists, are maybe the most completely different and completely opposed perspective. What does Ingold say about this comparison between what his dad was doing and what the Walbiri were doing? He says the process, the principle is just the same. Here we have this PhD guy going around scientifically studying the fungi and the Walbiri going on this quest, and it's the principle is exactly the same. The important that information is not knowledge. It has to be applied or put into the world to become knowledge. You can't just sit there and read about the fungi. You have to go out there and experience the fungi. But the principle is just the same. Now, this leads us to, if that principle is the same, a reconsideration of this idea of linguistic relativism. What Ingold wants to tell us here is that when we speak, we're not just encoding meaning into words. In the same way that his dad was not trying to encode meaning into the fungi, he was trying to introduce the fungi by feeling them. And that when we speak too, what we are trying to do is to speak with feeling. And this famous example, when you yell at somebody, the yell is meaning. It's not carrying meaning along with it. Certainly you can yell some words, but the fact that you're yelling is what is carrying the meaning. And that's why I'm asking you to use all these emojis to help me out with the feeling that you get when you read something or talk about. Because if you just have words on a paper or words on a computer screen, it's hard to get along, figure out what's going on. So he brings up a wonderful example of Leos Janáček, a Czech composer, who was trying to categorize or trying to listen to the sounds that he'd heard of waves or people yelling at each other or chickens clucking, and to bring that feeling into the world. He's a person who's trying to bring us this idea of music and of speaking as a way of producing feeling into the world. What Ingold is trying to say is that the stories that the Cree are telling about the hunting process are more like a form of poetry or of song, of feeling or conveying feeling in the world. He brings in here, in the terms of music, a philosopher, Suzanne Langer, and talks about philosophy in a new key. And here she's one of the first women to have an academic career in philosophy. The idea of being able to convey things in a key like music, which she says is something that we feel, unlike we often go to a museum and we see a painting, we want to know what it is or what it's titled, whereas if you just have music, you're supposed to be feeling it. So it brings us to this question of how we learn and how we move about and learn things in the world. What Ingold is trying to argue for is the idea of learning by this process of revelation. And oftentimes when we use the word revelation, as in, I've had a revelation, it's almost as if we're having a vision from above. And that's not in the sense of some revelation coming in, but in that older sense of revelation as having something revealed to us or showing or feeling it for ourselves. And that as we go into the world, we're not decoding the world, but we get more and more clues to the world so that we can discover for ourselves what is out there in the world. What Ingold calls an education of attention. That part where he said the clue guides you toward the meanings that lie at the heart of the world itself, which are normally hidden. You're discovering more and more clues or things as we go along. So what we get to at the end of this chapter is that what Ingold is saying is that there's what he calls a poetics of dwelling, which brings together back to the Cree and their stories of animals that offer themselves to the hunters, together with the stories from Australia of ancestors emerging from water holes, being shown that, together with Janáček's attempts to notate these sounds as he is hearing that, and together with his father trying to introduce him to the plants and the fungi as they would go for walks around. What he's saying here is that all of these rest, although they may appear so different in the world, and from very different societies and from different cultures, they rest on this same principle of knowing as discovering for yourself and educating your attention and being shown things, perhaps in the presence of someone who is experienced in that, but someone who is experienced enough to try and get you to see it for yourself. He says, well, intuition has gotten a bad rap because everybody wants to be rational and all scientific, but we need that intuition. And if we have intuition, because we're trained in it, we can do better science, be more engaged in our science. Now, I do want to flag something here. The ways that Ingold says that these things are united or the same is an apprentice style of learning in which the novice or the beginner learns in the company of an elder or elders, and they are shown things as how to do them. But there's something else that unites all of these stories, which I might be a little bit careful of. I didn't know how to illustrate it to you except by saying it this way. If I were to suddenly say, the only people that are smart enough to be in this class are, what would you do? That would not be a good thing. And if you look at all of these examples, you have the Cree, who are male hunters, who are saying that when the animal pauses and gives itself to them, it is an act of love. But they also talk about it as the pursuit of young women and seducing young women, which is not as lovely as love. What's this male-oriented process? It sounded like the Aboriginal Australians, that was mostly boys going around the country with their elder men. Janacek was a pretty passionate guy composer, and then you have Ingold and his dad in this father-son apprenticeship. I'm just saying that the apprenticeship relationship is one of the most beautiful teaching learning relationships that we have. But in certain instances, it can be very gendered in a way that we might just want to be careful with that because it gets pretty tangled up. And if we have these intense intimacies and these intense feelings, a lot of that stuff gets weird. So it's something that, again, there are certain things about this book that we just want to keep in mind as we go along, and that the gender aspect can be a little bit weird.